A live look at the U.S. Capitol. We're happening right now. House Democrats are holding a hearing on the 5th anniversary of the insurrection at the Capitol, January 6, 2021, 5 years ago today. So that special hearing is happening as we speak, hosted by House Democrats. So let's take a listen in. Let's take a look at what's being said at this moment.
States in holding the federal government accountable for its lawless actions?
Yes, thank you, Congressman. In doing so, I want to thank you all, Congress, for filing an amicus brief in the case where you all spoke to the extremity of what the federal government was asking for. What the federal government was asking for, and essentially in that case, was to ignore Congress and Congress's power given through the militia clauses, to ignore the courts. They basically argued that the president has discretion. It's not reviewable by even the courts to deploy the military onto the streets of American cities. I can't overstate how extreme that position, how frightening that position and that argument is. And that's why we took to action, and unfortunately, the Supreme Court denied their motion to stay.
And what should Congress take away from that?
That you should continue to assert your power as Congress. One consistent theme throughout the 48 cases that I mentioned is the administration ignoring what we learned in Schoolhouse Rock, that we have separations of powers and that Congress has been given the authority to appropriate, and Congress has been given the authority to set guidelines for the executive branch to carry out.
Thank you. Appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the witnesses. Lieutenant Governor Duncan, you were one of the people being told by Donald Trump, just find me 11,780 votes. That's all I need, right? And he thought it was just a matter of party loyalty. It would be obvious because at that point you were Republican, right? But you didn't think it was a question of party loyalty. You thought it was just a question of where were the votes, counting the actual votes of the people, right? You were one of numerous election officials around the country who refused to buckle under when Trump did that. That wasn't Donald Trump trying to stop election fraud. That was Donald Trump trying to commit election fraud. I wonder if you would give us a little more insight into what your thought process was, and also what do you think would have happened had you given in and other election officials given in at that point?
Thank you for the question. I think that's the important part to hang on is how, I don't think most Americans recognize or realize how close we were to breaking the back of democracy. I mean, if just a handful of us that had early on were very out front with this saying, look, there's no election fraud. And then all of a sudden we would have checked the brakes at some point and walked up to a microphone and said, you know what, I now do have concerns. The momentum would have shifted and we would have seen chaos. The moves made by Donald Trump and those around him, kind of his MAGA disciples and his administration, were very granular researched moves, right? They understood the mechanics of what a special session could do. But also they didn't understand the legalities or the constitutionality of why we would have a special session. We would do that to take care of the needs of Georgians, not to investigate some sort of conspiracy theory. I think it's most often when, even to this day, more than 5 years removed, a lot of Republicans walk up to me and they put their arm around me and they look both ways to make sure there's no microphones or cameras, and they'll say, hey, I appreciate you standing up for the right thing. I wish one day I could do it too. And I have two choices. I can either get mad and scream and holler at them and lose my mind in the moment, or I can play the long game and hope they wake up. And I think Republicans as a mass are starting to wake up one by one by one and creating this new way forward.
So When all that failed, then Trump went to Mike Pence, to his own vice president, and he tried to get him to exercise imaginary powers to nullify electoral college votes on the floor of the House, including Georgia's. At that point, he basically just said, discredit these results and we've got you a slate of counterfeit electors. Use those instead. Do people in Georgia understand that this was not only violence, but this was a massive assault on voting rights? It was an attempt to steal the voice of the people of Georgia in the election.
I think some do, but not all. It's unfortunate. That's part of the frustrating process that all of these pardons have come out. The gentleman I spoke about, Burt Jones, who is his chief cheerleader and is now the current lieutenant governor, was just recently pardoned. He was the ringleader of the fake electors group and this effort to create a special session. It was a very granular effort, as I mentioned earlier, and it's unfortunate. And in America, Americans are paying the price. As I said in my testimony, Americans day by day, if you're waking up and can't afford your groceries, that's a problem.
Yeah. Final question for the other two witnesses. But both of you are on the front lines of defending our freedom, defending our democracy in court. And we're winning overwhelmingly in the federal district courts and in the federal appeals courts. And people have to understand the rule of law is holding there. The big problem is we get up to the Roberts Court's emergency docket, the shadow docket, and it's like the twilight zone for justice there. Tell us how you are maintaining hope and faith through this process and what you're telling people about still the persisting fundamental importance of defending rights in court and treating our federal judiciary with the respect that it's traditionally deserved.
Well, Congressman, I draw some hope from Illinois v. Trump in the Supreme Court case that I've been referring to for a couple of reasons. Although the court did not address the issue of reviewability, which I thought it should, because this notion that the president has this authority to deploy the military and the courts don't have authority to review it is a very extreme notion. But one of the things that I think that many missed is footnote 4 in the case, which is Justice Kavanaugh taking a step backwards from his prior position that, in essence, race can be used as a notion for immigration stops, and that he took the time in that footnote to explicitly take a step back gives me a sense of hope.
The ability of the American people to initiate litigation against their government, as you know, Ranking Member Raskin, is an incredible right and power that people have. And what we see in court after court is it's not just the court decisions, and we are winning in the vast majority of these cases because the president's policies are so extreme. But it's not just the court decisions. It's individual Americans stepping up to the plate and saying, I'm going to require a public accounting of what my government is doing to me because I have rights. And what we have seen is that this administration in many instances has backed off of a number of the cases that we are bringing in court once we win, or even sometimes before we win, because the people are using their voices. It helps when you all use your voices too here in Congress. We are seeing that the vast majority of these cases are not going to the Supreme Court. And then, of course, when they do go to the Supreme Court, it has not been a complete, it hasn't been sort of a complete losing record on behalf of people and communities, but it is concerning. But I will say that this is a place on the shadow docket where Congress really does have a role, and you've been a champion of asking these questions. Congress has a role and can have a role in the future in asking questions and in checking the way the Supreme Court is managing its dockets. It is not American, it is not consistent with the way the judicial process is supposed to work to have a Supreme Court that is issuing orders unexplained to the American people, overriding explained decisions from judges. And by the way, judges